And so this idea of church PTSD became really blown up for me in terms of my thinking, in terms of my reasoning, in terms of how to engage the world around me. So I've always been an activist. I've always been involved with, conversations of justice and injustice and the need for reparations and all those kind of stuff. And I've always been a critic of the church as much as I've been one of her biggest supporters. But just being like for the last 10 months, just being outside of the church, just having to think through a lot of stuff and having some time to process and meditate and like sort of just go through a process of healing, I begin to recognize just a lot of stuff in my own heart and my own life, and just in general, that I think, are things that we can work on, and the things that needs to be worked on. And so this became quite real for me a couple of years ago with the whole roads must fall and fees must fall situation, or movements that were established that sort of brought the whole country to a massive standstill, the issue of decolonization, and the issue of, free education or access to better education. But one of the shocking things for me during that time was, was the church's response to that. And from where I was standing, being a Christian for so long, I could recognize that hey, like, why aren't we responding in a way that, really portrays God's love for the world, sort of this idea like, so God's love is only applicable or active, when it comes to things, when it comes to spiritual things, but when it comes to issues of injustice and when it comes to the social struggles that predominantly of our country and the world are struggling with, and all of a sudden as a church we don't have a voice, and that was one of the sad things for me. But like one of the other things for me, like something that became quite clear for me was also just, that I could start to see the clear divide between white and black, between race and culture, sort of this idea of, so as long as we talk about issues that affects the dominant culture, then everything is okay. Person who are not in the dominant culture, then all of a sudden, like, we don't have anything to say, So it's at that time where I really started to think about, like, what the role of the church should be in the midst of these situations, because especially when it comes to pastoral care, because that is where I really realized, like, hey, you don't really care about me. You say you do, but you don't really, because in the midst of this hard and difficult situation, you don't know how to pastorally take care of me. You don't know how to guide my heart. You don't know how to pastorally care for my heart. So every time I bring up this conversation, I even just say something along the lines, then all of a sudden it's like this massive, then like everybody's sort of going on the defense about, like, okay, so why are you talking about, like, like we weren't in, we weren't in apartheid, we didn't own slaves, we didn't oppress people, but the mere fact that you are benefiting from a system of injustice means that you are. And so it's during that time that I started to think and started to struggle and really pray about this whole issue, and where I became quite uncomfortable with the church where I was in, because I really felt like they did not make enough effort to really engage the conversation. It's fine for us to pray about the situation, to pray about, like, about the feast must fall, guys, and pray for the rose must fall, guys, and pray that the Lord will provide for your needs and all those kind of stuff. So it's fine, but we are not willing to engage it. We are not willing to talk about it. We are not willing to get in the dirt and talk about it. And so that reminds me of a scripture of the Good Samaritan. So who, like this idea of so who is your neighbor? So is your neighbor the person standing next to you, living next door to you? Like, who is your neighbor? And a study of the text will reveal that within that time, everybody would have understood that your neighbor is your enemy. It's the person that you despise the most. It's the person that you would not go and talk with and have a meal with. And it's during that time where I begin to realize that as long as I play the game, as long as I stay within the boundaries of the dominant culture, then everything is okay. Then I'm accepted, that I'm loved. But the moment I ask questions that question the dominant culture, then all of a sudden, like, there's something wrong with me, that I don't know Jesus anymore, and there's something wrong with my heart because I question the church. And so this is sort of like more a journal or a blogging journal that I want to start, and just as I think through this, as I'm hoping to start conversations through this, and just really want to invite people from different perspectives, different generations. I was talking to another friend of mine, and I heard of a thing called ageism. Like, I've got even no idea what it is, but apparently it is a thing, and hoping to really invite people of saying, like, so what should the church's response be when it comes to issues that pertains those living within the less dominant culture? So the current thought in my mind, or current thing that I'm working on, so I'm currently writing on something I call a theology from the poor. Most writings and most things and works of ministry, when it pertains to poverty, is always a ministry or a theology to the poor. But I'm asking the question, what would ministry from the poor look like? Does the poor have something to offer? Is there wisdom? Why is it always that those in power, that those within the dominant culture always feel the need to do ministry to the poor, and are not always open to receive ministry from the poor? So that are sort of the things that I want to look at, and sort of the questions that I want to ask with, and really just a conversation that I want to get going. Seeing that I've been in church for so long, for most of my life, my whole life, to be clear on that, but these kind of conversations of, like, has never really been conversations that has been established or gatherings held that we can talk about this stuff, because for some other reason we are afraid to talk about this stuff. We are afraid to talk about a theology from the poor. We are afraid to talk about issues of social injustice, of issues of, crimes against humanity, but one of the things that I constantly tell people, like, hey, as much as you don't want to talk about these issues, as much as you don't like talking about these issues, here's the reality: it is affecting all of us. It's affecting how we think and how we reason, and even from a psychosociological point of view, it's a massive. Where do we start, and how do we frame this, and how do we move forward in engaging this? Just to be clear, my big question here is, like, is a question of pastoral care. I was in a predominantly white church for most of for more than 10, 11 years, and I felt, you did not know how to care for me as a person of color. Even though there was caring, but that caring was structured in a way that benefited the dominant culture, and the dominant culture was white. And as long as I slot in with that, and as long as I stayed within those boundaries, all was okay and nobody questioned me. So the hope is to start a global conversation, a local conversation, but more so a national conversation, because there is just so many aspects to all of this. So I'm hoping, I would love to hear your comments, and I would love to hear ideas and thoughts, as I think about all of this. And for the most part, I'm just trying to figure this out for my own heart, and for my own life and for the future.